long time, and along the course, I had chance to collaborate with Betzalel that I will mention later, and also have met a few people from Israel. I really appreciate the chance, and I really enjoy it so far. I would like to sort of talk about it later, but before, I would like to talk about first what the lab is doing, and also I would also like to introduce how has it been for us as a scientist to interact with designers, and how that inspired us, and how gave us power to do more science forward. Okay, so this is a picture that I never really knew before, but the designer people told me. But this is a sort of the first prototype.
I'm sorry, we cannot see your screen. We see a screen of the event.
You do? Okay, just wait, hold on. You don't
maybe
see
you need to
this.
switch the screen.
Wait a second. Is it? You don't see it now?
No, maybe you can stop sharing and then.
Wait a second. Why is it? Hold on.
Yeah, please try again.
I'll try it again. Interesting. Share this. Do you see the?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you see...
Yeah. Now we see the neurons.
What do you see here?
The neurons in the Petri dish.
What about this one?
No, it's not. It's just being stuck on the.
Okay. Each time I have to share this screen. Wait a second. Okay. I do see. Okay. Okay. This one neuron.
It worked. Yeah.
And then
there's I see multiple neurons now.
What? Do you see transistor picture? No.
No.
Okay. It just worked before in practice. Why it doesn't work now?
Yes.
What? Okay.
It worked very well.
Let me. How does this work? Let me try sharing the screen. It's I don't really know how that works.
Maybe share just the window of the
share
of PowerPoint.
The window. Okay. Here, this one.
Yes.
You do see it, and you do see the transistor.
Now, yeah, but I think it went again to this. When you press play, it gets stuck. So
okay, I cannot. Okay. I'll just share the screen. How's that?
Okay.
Okay. Let's do that. Let's share the desktop one. Okay. And do you see the desktop? Okay, maybe it's the same. And then this, do you see?
Yeah. It's full screen. It's good.
What about this one? Okay, let's change.
Let's continue.
All right, good. Let's continue. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is a transistor that invented 70 or more than 70 years ago. And that's being developed further, and it became the smartphone, computer, and everything that supports our life, our modern life. But that's been just 70 years. So that gave us sort of feeling that maybe we have more chance to develop something new, something different that computes and help our lives. And then one of the candidates could be neurons, and then neurons that means that the neurons from our cells that computes information in our brain. So we're trying to model or simplify the circuit outside our body, and then see if they can function and they can be used in the future. So that's what we're trying to do in our lab. So our brain has many neurons inside, and then each of them fire action potentials, and they send signal from one to another through their connections by physical connection called synapses. And each neuron has cell body, and then one axon that sends that signal, and dendrites that receive signals. So we try to culture them in a dish outside the body. And then we try to mimic circuitry or circuit structure using a micro device. And for example, here, trying to have two compartments that connect each other. And then by combining those, we envision to make more complex circuitry in the brain. And then at some point, we hope that they gain ability to calculate and function like in a brain. So to do so, we use human-induced pluripotent stem cells, iPS cells. Those are something called reprogrammed cells that are derived from regular cells of body, but they can become any type of cells in the body, including neuron, muscle, other organ, blood cells, and bone cells. But as we give them a direction, they can become many cells. Therefore, of course, it can make neurons, and therefore we can use it as a static material to build our neural tissues. And this is the first step. So we make something we call sushi rice bowl. Maybe I should say falafel in this case, like a sort of what is it called? The about 10,000 cells that are put together in a ball structure, and that's the first step for us. And that start the program for the cells to become neurons and become more like brain. But it's very, very small at this point. It's about half of a millimeter in diameter. And then we put them into this micro device that we made from silicone rubber that have, in this case, 8 places, but each of them have 2 holes and then 1 thin channel connecting them. And then we introduce that cell aggregate, cell sphere, into one of the chamber or both of the chamber. And then what happens is that, sorry, this is how we put. We just pick up the ball and put it into those chambers. And then what happens is that you can see that in the culture media, in the device, they can be sort of held in the chamber. And then the axons, really thin channel, about a micron in diameter, can grow from each cell, in this case, from right to left. And you can see that growing axons kind of bundle together each other towards the other end. And then what happened after is that here you can see that sort of size. Here you see these 2 spheres that grow axons each other. And this is sort of labeled each cells with many different colors. And as we zoom in with different microscope, you can appreciate, you can see the neuron, the shape of each neurons, and those are colored in different colors, like green, blue, red, and those are sort of weave together to form neural circuit locally within each sphere. And then by combining those, we make a sort of miniaturized circuitry in the brain, and then each of the sphere has local circuit, and then those grow axons toward each other, and then they connect each other, start sending signal toward each other reciprocally. As you can see here, we have electrodes on the bottom of the spheres, and we can record activity of each neurons within those spheres within a miniaturized neural circuit. Okay, so that's what we do in a lab. And this is very good because our human brain is really hard to explore or research, because we don't want to destroy our brain, of course, but by using those IPS cells, you can make the circuit that you like to have, and then you can sort of understand how the brain works and also try to develop drugs that cures brain diseases. But really key question for us and the field, or for everybody in the neuroscience, is that how do we really make the neurons function? It's a very strange question, because we do know neurons function in our brain, but we cannot make them really functional outside the body. So there must be reason, or there must be sort of trick for them to really unlock the function of them. And further, how can we interact with them as human? How can they benefit us in the future as a sort of product, or the system that help our lives directly? So those are the questions that we've been asking together with the design lab here at IIS. We're so fortunate to sort of interact with a lot of people, including Yuri. So the first prototype that they made is that this prototype called Aura that has the circuitry that are developed further to mimic our system and sense the chemical signal and then process it and diagnose it for your health. And that's sort of one of the prototype idea. Another is the more practical one. We've been having planar electrodes on the glass, and that limits us from knowing their neuronal activity within the tissue. So they came up with an idea to have three-dimensional neural interface so that electrodes can be accessed or placed on top of the spheres quite easily from above. So that's another example. Another one, more recent one, is to have the neurons as a sort of pet for us, and enjoy their ability to calculate and incorporate into the sort of like a neural network, a deep learning system, to really appreciate the ability of neurons, and that's also sort of thought about as a prototype. So those really give us a lot of insight, not just sort of interesting idea. They really tell us what's needed for us to develop and what are really the key part that prevents us from understanding the neurons, understanding brain, and then that really inspires and then gives us energy and also the scientific insights to accelerate research so far. And one of the things that we had, one of the interaction we had is with the Betzalel Institute in Israel. And I would like to share the video for the project that we had. And first, I'll show you the overview of the video, and also the second part, I will show you the actual outcome from them. Okay. Here we go.
We are in the academy. We have no business model. We don't search for any kind of business model. We are doing what we believe is for the greater good of the public. We don't have any exit strategy, and we're not searching for the bottom line of the value that it can bring as products. So I think this is our duty, to teach young people the craft of design and about design thinking, but it's also our duty to do something for the greater good.
The RCA IIS Tokyo Design Lab is a new collaboration between the University of Tokyo and the Royal College of Art, London, which was established in February 2017. And the idea is to take design thinking, design practice, to turn scientific research into a real deployable innovation.
We started this collaboration with Betzalel because we were interested in expanding the network of institutes around the world that the Design Lab was connected with.
Betzalel is sitting in Hatzofim in Jerusalem. It's one of the oldest academies in Israel, where it started with crafts and it developed into this amazing place where a lot of students experiencing their young adolescent life as new artists and designers.
We're always looking around, sniffing around to see different projects and different ideas and different laboratories and different things that happen in the world now, which might be really relevant for our course and things that we can offer as subject.
The whole project was cooked up very quickly, and we actually didn't want to constrain the students with a tight brief. So what we did was merely remotely open the door to the labs here at the Institute of Industrial Science and invite them to take a look at what goes on here and to respond to it in their own speculative design manner.
We couldn't bring the students physically into the lab, but we wanted to immerse them as much as possible in the researchers and the scientists' work. Yeah, we just took a webcam and we had a short call with a researcher in the lab, and then He just took us on a tour through the lab, showing all the facilities, all the instruments they're using.
And for me, it was really interesting to do this project with the lab, because what we did is exactly what the lab does. Like they go, they talk with other labs, and then they do something about this technology. And it was really interesting to have like this mini lab that we had in another country that does the same thing. So for me, it was really special.
All of the project's outputs were in the form of a movie. What we hadn't been expecting was the kind of the powerful impact of their thinking shown in the communication methods that they finally proposed.
Okay, sorry. Oops. So the time is limited. Sorry. Oh, I cannot move this. Sorry. Time is unlimited. I would like to go to next one. Oh, how do I go next?
We wanted.
I cannot go next. I'm sorry. Where is the? How do I? Oh yeah, go. Oh, sorry. Okay, so that was the overview. I would like to show you the actual outcome of the video for this. Okay, so that was the video that was produced by the students from Betzerol. It was really nice for us to see it because I kind of feel I can feel a lot of the components that has to be developed, and it could be it's very important for them to have a modular, have an interactive, have it sort of standardized, and they can enjoy the outcome can be very different each time. So those are the really important things that I learned from this, and it was really interesting and inspiring for us, and it was really great. Sorry, the time is limited, so I'll finish here, and then I would like to talk more in the later session. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sensei. Yeah, that was fascinating and brings back some really good memories from the project.
Yeah.
And I hope we can continue and do even more projects in the future. Yeah. So if anyone has questions to Kiyuchi-sensei, please write them down in the Q&A section of the webinar. There's a little Q&A button, and we will answer all of them at the end of the talks at the Q&A session. So our next speaker for today is Maya Ben David. Well, she's a designer based in Israel, she's been working on a collaboration with the Hebrew University for the last couple of years. She does some really interesting projects, and I'll just pass the microphone to her to introduce herself and her projects. So Maya, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I will just share my screen. All right.
Yeah, we can see the PDF.
Okay.
Yeah, it's full screen.
Great. So in recent years, I 3D scan and 3D print flowers, or try to, because it's quite difficult. By doing so, I explore the technology's limitations and question our evolving notion of nature. Several years ago, I initiated a project in Japan with Oeno-san, a local Ikebana craftsman, and Fab Cafe Tokyo. I wanted to scan flowers and use them in traditional Ikebana arrangement to explore the way craft and generate new questions regarding our relationship with technology. During the making process, I asked Ueno-san why he chose to combine the printed flowers with roots and why he hanged it in the air. He felt that in terms of materials, it will work better together since both of them are dead. This is also why he hanged it in the air, since they don't need water or vase or a kind of pot to contain them. Roots, which in many cultures symbolize human connections and our tangibility, presented here floating with no anchor. From my perspective, Oeno-san created an interesting narrative to the way we think about digital matter and maybe our post-digital experience, floating in between, connected but not really, as we all know. As a designer, I ask myself how our connected and interactive computer environment is shaping our expectations for materials and our physical surroundings. How will new material-based technologies shift the way we interact with the world? And how will digital programmed materials be part of a new interaction languages? And so on. All these questions had to find a place to grow. I was lucky enough to be part of a new and exciting exploration. Performing Materials is a collaborative platform we initiated between Betzalel Master Program in Industrial Design and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Normally, we use the term performance in the context of materials when we want to talk about technical qualities. In design, performance has a different context. It refers to a live action taking place in front of an audience. With this title, we aim to link the functional qualities of novel materials with human experiences and new interaction they may design. The field of material was chosen as a common ground since it's embedded into design discipline in general and in Betzalel practices in particular. Furthermore, we see material technologies as an emerging field of expertise where scientists and designers will need to work together in order to generate deployable innovation. And when we go deeper into the inner layers of design and material science, we look at this relationship between structure, function, and shape as a starting point. Some projects start with a fascination towards new form formation, and others start with identifying new functions. Our time frame is about 16 weeks of work. It's quite intense. We have 10 master students coming from different disciplines of design. It can be fashion, graphic design, industrial design, jewelry, ceramics, and so on. And normally we work between 3 up to 6 labs each course cycle, coming from physics or chemistry, nanotechnology, nanoscience, biology, and so on. Most of them are basic science and not applicative. If I were to generalize the projects that we have done until now, I can maybe divide it into these 4 big categories. Sensing science are projects dealing with our senses, sight, smell, taste, tactility, and so on. Poetic mechanisms are projects looking at different mechanisms of movement, how we generate movement in material, how we perceive this movement. Material identity are projects trying to refer to the cultural aspects of new materials and how we also perceive it and what kind of material expression we can generate. Alternative futures are projects starting from technology generated in the lab, but we project it into future scenarios and try to ask questions about that. So I'll present now several projects to showcase some of our work. How we can use salt as an alternative and more sustainable construction material. Daniel Mandler's lab specialized in coating. The research here was a reaction to a national problem dealing with salt waste, a byproduct of our Dead Sea factories, the producers of magnesium chloride, industrial salts, and other raw materials for the cosmetic industry. So what we can do with so much wasted salt? This project is based on research engaged in developing salt production technologies based on compression, which gives the material strength enough to be considered as an alternative building blocks. Together, Dani and Leah examine salt as a raw material for use in industrial design and architecture. Leah physical explorations focused on other possible product processing technologies like laser, CNC milling, and lathe. She used different salt sources and levels of grain to achieve rich and surprising surface qualities. The physical samples of their shared research helped the lab trigger government officials' imagination and better communicate the material novelties and future possibilities. How can we design with sol gel to generate new material performances? One of Professor Davidov Nir's fields of research is dedicated to sol gel, a glass-like material processed at a room temperature in a polymerization process that bypassed the traditional melting phase. Since sol gel is processed in room temperature, Noah experimented with organic pigments, some of them fluorescent and even scented, hoping to avoid the use of current glass pigments, which can be highly toxic. As a glass-blowing artist, Noah used her traditional knowledge to develop techniques for sculpting in sol gel to generate new material expressions. In her experiments, Noah aimed to reinterpret glass traditions and historical context. How can we use the unique quality of perovskite to create new experiences? Perovskite enables creating highly efficient and affordable translucent solar cells. Professor Leo's Edgar laboratory developed perovskite third-generation solar cells. In their dialogue, Leoz and Orly wanted to explore the relationship between ornament and function by using perovskite color and translucent qualities. Inspired by the mashrabiyah, an element of traditional Islamic architecture that separated house interior and exteriors while allowing air and light in, the researchers created a solar cell system inspired by the architecture elements and examined how pattern design can affect the energy efficiency of the solar cell. How can we create new 3D textiles? Professor Eran Sharon will speak here, so I will say just briefly that Eran's lab is researching growth pattern and complex morphologies. The lab experiments with soft active solids, which for designers is a great playground as well. One example is a shared project with Ronnie Yechizkel, a textile designer. Ronnie took several movement principles researched in the lab and envisioned them as textile mechanisms. Ways to give textile complex shapes and new behaviors. Here we can see one movement typical to what they researched in the lab. Sorry. We can see here kind of layout of pattern. By multiplying it, she imagined a fabric moving with this kind of movement. Here, textile sheets come together with a 3D printed PLA geometric infrastructure. Under conditions of heat and water, they bend, shrink, and change their shape and structure into pre-planned textural surfaces. The PLA grid functions here as a dynamic mechanism, reshaping the textile. In our process, we use language as a key player. We can generate new phrases like self-standing image to define our shared challenges, or create design interpretation to a scientific mechanism. We try to give place to questions asked by the two disciplines as two voices in the process without being judgmental. We see beauty and aesthetics as forces shifting our entanglements. We cannot avoid that. Since we work fast, intuition becomes also central in the process for both sides. At the end, we try not to talk about research, even though it's our aspiration. We are happy with generating new perspectives. I would like to thank this opportunity to all the people involved. There are so many, and thank you very much.
Okay, Maya, thank you very much. Again, if anyone has questions for Maya, so please feel free to type it in the Q&A. We will answer all of them at the session in the end of these talks. So our next speaker is Kaori Sugihara Sensei. We had the opportunity working together with her on a project for the last half a year, or maybe it was even a year now. She will tell you about it and a little bit about her research. So Sugihara Sensei, the stage is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Here we see our screen.
The screen?
It's good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's full screen.
For the introduction. I've never attended this event before, so nice to meet you to most of you. I realized the talk that I prepared today is maybe a little too nerdy for this event after all these fancy movies and images. Okay, but what can I do? Let me give it a try. Okay, so I used to have my lab in Switzerland. So I was in Europe for 12 years. And then I moved my lab to Tokyo 2 years ago, 2020. And in hindsight, I thought that maybe it was the worst timing ever, because I started my new job in Tokyo on 1st of April, 2020. And on the day one, I got the key to the lab, which is of course empty. And I was alone in the lab. And in 2 weeks, the entire the institute got locked down because of COVID. And I thought, okay, great. And then back then I was planning to transfer lots of things. I was planning to transfer instruments. I was planning to transfer my students so that they can come over to Japan to help me installing the new lab and stuff. But of course, everything was canceled because of this pandemic. And then, so I had to think, okay, what should I do? So there I was alone, and no student, no instrument, no money, because all the funding that I got in Switzerland, I couldn't carry over to Japan because those money come from Switzerland, like a Swiss tax. So why should they fund Japanese research, right? So I was thinking, okay, maybe there is something small that I can do it by myself, with a cheap instrument that doesn't cost much. And then the topic that I chose was about this mask project. So today I'd like to talk about this. It's kind of a hobby project for me that we've been trying for over the last 2 years since I came to Japan. Okay. So this mask called N95 that the health caretakers are using at hospitals. So what's so special about this mask is that the name N95 stands for cutting the particles at least more than 95%. So this is like a certificate for the quality. And then if you cut it open, it has 3 layers. And the first and the last layer is like a protective layers. And then one in the middle is called polypropylene. So this is what makes this mask special. And then if you zoom into this polypropylene, it looks like this. So it looks like a spider web that has a mesh size of, let's say, around 10 micrometer. Okay, so this 10 micrometer pore size, do you think it's big or small? Okay, so you have to compare with something, right? So these are the distribution of the particle size that you create when you sneeze or cough or talk. So if you look at the sneezing, so you produce aerosols in the range between sub-micrometer up to 1,000 micrometer, which is 1 millimeter. So 10 micrometer is roughly around here, which means all the particles bigger than this will be captured by this mesh. But all the particles smaller than that could like potentially escape from this mesh, right? So you might think, okay, maybe 10 micrometer pore size is not like good enough. But the thing is, despite the fact that there are lots of particles smaller than the mesh size, it manages to capture quite a lot of particles because the mechanism how it catches, it filters particles, it's not just by the physical block, but it also captures through electrostatic attraction. So this polypropylene during the fabrication done by a method called melt blown, it naturally has a static electricity. So this like a fabrication method gives this charges to the polymer. So it's naturally charged. And then thanks to that, we were able to capture particles that are much smaller than the mesh size. Okay, so now we know that the static electricity is something to do with the performance of this mask. And then, okay, so from our daily lives, we know that the water is the enemy for the static electricity. For example, in winter, we get lots of like static electricity in your hairs or the sweaters because the air is dry. And in summer, we don't have much, right? It's because it's humid. So because of that, if you look at the package of this mask, it's written that you should not use it more than 8 hours because our exhaling breath is so humid that if you use it for too long, this humidity will kill the charges and it compromises its performance. And in the same way, you should not wash it and then reuse it because when you wash, it contacts water, which kills the charges. And also you should not store in a humid place for a long time because the humidity only could also kill the charges. Okay, so now that we know that the charges are the key, and then related to that topic, you might have seen this type of mask that has this, tiny little plastic thing in the middle. And then some of you might have like wondered, what the hell is this like a plastic stuff in the middle? And then this one is actually something to do with the humidity. So it's called like an exhalation valve. And what's important is it's one-way valve. And what that means is that when you inhale, it's made such that the air goes through the filter so that it filters out the viruses or the aerosols. But when you exhale, this one-way valve opens and it channels through your moisturized, like exhaling breath through this valve so that it doesn't contaminate the filter as much. So the manufacturer of the masks knows that the humidity is the problem. So they, make an effort to get rid of the humid exhaling breath as fast as possible so that it can prolong the lifetime of these masks. Okay, so the valve protects polypropylene from the moisture in exhaling breath. And then if you know that, then you know you should not use these masks on the street, okay? Because sometimes I see people in the train like using this type of masks with valves, but it makes no sense. Do you know why? Because if you have this type of masks, this type of mask is not preventing you from spreading the viruses. If you exhale, your breath will just come out from this valve as if you're not wearing a mask. So these masks are for the health caretakers to protect them from being infected, but it doesn't prevent you from spreading the viruses. Okay, so these are the backgrounds. And then when I came to Tokyo, it was 2020, April, so around here, we had the first wave in Japan. And then as the rest of the world, we're so not prepared for this. So we had the shortage in the masks. And then I saw in the news that the hospitals are washing and reusing these masks because they didn't have enough. And I thought it's dangerous because I knew that the charge is gone if you wash and the filtering efficiency is being compromised. Okay, so the goal of the project that we thought is, can we recharge these masks after washing so that we can recycle it? And then for that, the device that we use is called Van de Graaff generator. It's not really a high-tech machine. You know, it's a very tiny, like a toy that you typically find in a scientific museum. And then it's used for the demonstration of static electricity. So it creates high voltage. So just a tiny toy like this could create up to 50 kilovolt, which is really a lot. So the voltage that comes out from the electrical outlet from the wall is 100 volt in Japan. Maybe it's 200 in Europe. And then this one is 50 kilovolt, which means it's 2 orders of magnitude higher than what we usually use. So it's very high voltage, but you can touch it because it's low current. So it's a very cheap and safe way to produce high voltage. And then if you open this toy, this device, what's inside is like this. Is very primitive, actually. You can make it by yourself. So it has a belt that is typically made of rubber or leather. And then these 2 wheels, when they rotate, it creates charges by the friction, which is called trivial electric effect. And then it collects one of the charges on one side of the electrode and another charges to the other electrode. So the strong field is being generated between these 2 electrodes. So the idea is that if we place a mask in between, we can apply high voltage. So can we recharge the mask? So from here, it's the data that we measured in our lab. So I would like you to remember these names, these numbers. We measure different surfaces, the charges of different surfaces. And then what's important is 3 and 4, because these are the both sides of the polypropylene sheet. So first, we took a new mask, we cut it open and we took out this polypropylene sheet and we measure the charges on this polypropylene. So this is the result. So the first one is the 3M from USA. And then we found some charges, but it was not like a really consistent. So if I average, the data looks like this. It doesn't look really good, right? And then this one is 3M Japan. So it's the same company, but probably produced in Japan. And then we found a very good, like a charge, negative charges on the polypropylene surfaces. And then since these 2 masks are from the same company, the quality of the product should be roughly the same, I guess. The only difference that I can think of is the shipping and the storage duration. So probably this mask in the USA, it had a charge when it's been fabricated, but because it had to be shipped to Japan, probably it was on a ship in a humid environment for a long time. So it lost the charges, I think. So this already tells us how you store this mask is very, very important. And then these are other two companies. Some masks have charges, some of them not. So while measuring, I felt, quite scary. Even if you took a new mask, some of them don't actually have good charges because of the way it's been stored. Okay, so now we took one of the good masks and then assume that we used it and then we sterilized them. So there are different ways to sterilize for reuse. One of them is autoclave, which is a device to create high temperature, high pressure to kill germs. And then another way is to just put it into a washing machine and wash it, or boil in the hot water. So we tried all of them, and then for all of them, the charges that we had initially was either reduced or almost gone. So let's take this sample as an example. So after heating in the hot water, the charge is almost gone. So the question is, if we dry and then apply higher voltage, can we recover the voltage? And then the answer is yes. So we managed to recover good charges. And then not only the charge, but if we measure the filtering efficiency, we saw that it's been recovered too. So the initial mask has around 95% filtering efficiency. But if we wash it, it goes down. And then if we recharge, it goes back again. So now the performance is also okay, back to normal. So yes, by applying high voltage, we can wash and then recharge and reuse the masks. Okay, so this data is something that we took during the experiment. So this one is a surgical mask. Surgical mask also uses polypropylene actually. So from material point of view, it's not that different from N95. So it's a very good mask. And if we check the filtering efficiency, it's almost like 95%. So it's really a good mask. And then after that, out of curiosity, we also measured lots of other masks that people use on the street. And then shockingly, we found that all these other masks made of polyester or cotton, it filters almost nothing. So scientifically, actually, it doesn't make sense to wear any other masks than the polypropylene masks. Okay, so up until now, we've been using this huge Van de Graaff generator, which is huge and ugly, and it's weird. So to make this the technology more accessible to people, we wonder if we can make it smaller and cute so that we can make a small device for home use. And the idea is that right now we dispose the surgical masks every day, but can we collect and wash and recharge and recycle? So I have a video. Oh, I'm not sure if let me check.
現在、不織布マスクは世界中で人々の健康やコミュニケーションなど生活を支える非常に重要な役割を果たしています。医療機関においても、カフェやレストランにおいても、また我々の普段の生活においても日常的に使用され、常に欠かせないものとなっています。マスクは物理的な作用以外に静電気によってエアロゾルなどのサイズの小さな粒子を捉えることによって侵入を妨げています。しかし1日使用するにつれ時間の経過によってマスクの静電気が弱くなり、衛生面などの理由でマスクの多くは1日使用された後に廃棄されています。世界中では2021年現在、毎月1290億枚ものマスクが使用されていると言われています。
私2020年の4月に着任したんですけれども、ちょうどコロナの第1波が来た時でテレビを見ていたら、このマスクが第1波で病院で足りなくなっているので、病院が洗って再利用しているっていうニュースを見たんですね。この静電気は取れてしまったけどきれいになったマスクにもう一度静電気をつけることで再利用ができないだろうかというところから研究が始まりました。 今回の作ったデバイスというのは、そのもう一回静電気をリチャージするのを簡単にできるような卓上のデバイスということで、マスクを入れて蓋してポンってこうスイッチを押すとリチャージされてフィルター能力が回復するよっていう、そういうデバイスになります。
マスクリチャージャーはマスクを帯電させるための電極、電極を帯電させるための帯電装置、制御部、そして電源部から構成されます。蓋を開けてマスクを設置し、電源を入れた後3分間帯電させ、デバイスからマスクを取り出します。とてもシンプルな操作と短時間でのマスクのリチャージが可能となり、マスクをより安全に、そしてより効果的に活用するために新たな選択肢を考えることができるようになります。
Okay, so this is where we are now. So we've done this in collaboration with DLX, led by Miles, and these are the people who contributed to this project. And we were at this point where we tried to transfer this project from academic research to a product. I'm not sure if we will succeed, but I hope maybe we can report in another meeting someday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sugiura-sensei. That was very fascinating. Yeah, and great to see products coming out of the lab, slowly moving to the real world. It's very exciting always. Okay, our next speaker is Professor Eran Sharon. He's a physicist from the Hebrew University, from the faculty of, from the Rach Institute of Physics. He's been working together with Maya for the last couple of years on a few very interesting projects, which he will share with you. Professor Sharon, the stage is yours. I think you're muted. Can you press mute?
Just a second, please.
Now it's good. We can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Do you see the screen?
Yes, we do.
So hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Eran Sharon. I'm a physicist at the Rach Institute of Physics, and it's a pleasure to participate in this session and to see what you do in Japan in terms of collaborations between science and design. And this will be the topic of my talk here, which involves many people here. But let's start. I will explain what we see here in a moment. This is a completely synthetic piece of material that is beating like a heart and changing its shape. We will get. So I will briefly introduce myself and my field, where I come from, what type of physics I'm doing, then focus on some specific topic which I study for several years, self-morphing, created sheets, and get to the main point of showing how we try here at the Hebrew University to integrate designers into a research process, the difficulties, the benefits, and what we have learned from this. So my field of physics is nonlinear physics, also sometimes known as pattern formation. If we think about limit ourselves to patterns, then many physicists would ask, what is creating this hurricane? No one steered this large-scale structure. It appeared out of the equations that govern the atmosphere flow. This tiny snowflake, what built this shape? this cracking, very specific and non-trivial, with different scales and angles that we can identify what set these structures, even large-scale structures as galaxies. What we see here down this colorful one is a bubble of air inside a gap filled with oil. Again, I will not get into details, but this very refined structure is generated not because someone imposes a shape, but it is an outcome, or it emerges from the dynamics of the relevant equations of motion of the fluid. We can look at plants, and I will say a few words about this, and even biological living structures. Again, these are biological systems, but these are materials. They obey the laws of physics. So how do they operate? How form is formed? How shape is formed? Naturally, this field has connections with many different fields. I will talk about how structures like these are formed. How thin sheets, these are thin sheets of paper, how they shape themselves into a three-dimensional structure. It is not an origami which you take a flat sheet, externally constrained it. This is a sheet that shapes itself. Now, if we take it into the dynamics and industrial world, when we think about machines, then typically we imagine something like this, rigid, that rotates and moves. Sometimes you can attach some flexible elements to it. But when we look at natural things like this marine snail or these flowers, these are different types of machines. They operate via different concepts. Each pixel in this flower or snail expands and shrinks or rotates. They attach together and eventually leads to the formation of the entire body into a three-dimensional shape. Now, this is extensively used in nature. This is nearly the sole form procedure in natural things, but not in man-made structure engineering structures. And the reason is that first, theoretical framework to describe such things missing, and then even if theoretical understanding exists, we need materials and techniques to build such structure. So here is a primitive example of such a soft machine. This is a piece of gel in a petri dish. We increase the temperature, we decrease the temperature, and see that the shape changes. I will go to this example in a moment. So, as physicists, when we try to be involved or understand such a process of self-moving, we need a mathematical and physical formulation. Please don't be bothered by the fact that you might miss some of the details. I'm just sketching a big picture. So we start with the mathematical core, which is known as Gauss term. Gauss was the greatest mathematician in his time, and he found a connection between the object, mathematical object that describes distances across the surface, we call it metric field, and the three-dimensional shape of this surface in space, which we call a shape or a curvature field. Since he found and formulated explicitly a connection, mathematical connection between how distances are converted into three dimensions, we can now use this mathematical tool to formulate a theory in which we will manipulate distances and get three-dimensional shape. Now, physics is not just geometry. We need also to write the physics, the mechanics of the object, the energetics. Again, with no details, this is work that's done in several theoretical works. You write an energy, you minimize it, you express it with Gauss terminology, and then we can do calculations. So this is our part, and we will skip all these details. Now, just to see that shapes and complex shapes can emerge spontaneously, if we imagine a cylinder of cells that grows and you add rings. Now, if the number of cells in a ring grows exponentially, like without control, we will get a funnel shape. But this shape, as a geometrical shape, axisymmetric one, has an end. You cannot extend it further after it is fully open. You're trying to glue a long ring of cells, longer than 2 pi r, to a ring of radius r, and there's no shape like it. So no one changed. The growth is exactly identical here, 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 everywhere. But still you see that you will get a shape. And then you can ask, is it in action in development of growing sheets, etc., etc.? You can do simulations. I will not talk about it, and experiments. I will briefly talk and see that indeed a boring growth field with no input is converted into complex shape beyond a critical computed geometrical limit. And then we can go and work with botanists and see to what extent plants and other developing organs use this. To do experiments, we use gels, responsive gels that shrink and expand when we increase and lower the temperature. But the level of the amount of shrinkage depends on the component in the gel. So if we build from the beginning a gel with gradient, with differences in components, once we heat it, it will be converted into a difference in shrinkage and swelling of the gel, meaning it's like growth. And if we remember what Gauss told us, that changing distances can lead to shape via clear mathematical connection, then here we have a mechanism to convert flat sheets, to program into them some growth property, activate it, and then get the shape. So here is here is a video of top view of a disk of a gel. We will increase the temperature and then decrease it. The originally flat sheet turns into a, in this case, saddle-like shape. And when we decrease the temperature, it goes back to its flat configuration. And this is actually a new shaping concept, shaping not by inducing externally a specific shape, but by letting the thing grow and select a shape. And with this, you can do many different structures and shapes. We did it originally with gels. Later on, we could modify the technique to make the gradients with light and get different, more delicate structures. Other people in the United States implemented these techniques in sub-millimeter scales. And later on, many different materials were used. This is pneumatic elastomer, different material, not a gel. This is the same gel that we use, but fitted for a 3D printer. So you can replace the different types of gel in the right place with the printer. This is kind of printed cellulose dough-like structure that can change its shape. This is a work in Media Lab. Again, pneumatic elastomers, inflatable structures that can take shape. And I will say a word about this work. Basically, you can take it even one step further, not just let the shape, the structure respond to external stimuli, but let a reaction, a chemical reaction, operate inside the material, and then it swells and shrinks very much like our heart. When you have an action potential going through the heart, it induced local shrinkage, and due to it, a dynamic change of shape. And you can map it in 3 dimensions, etc., etc. Okay, let's skip all these details and focus on a very specific, simple structure. This is a seed pod of a plant of Guinea, and the 2 valves are flat and straight, but when they get dry, they curl into 2 opposite helices. This is how it shoots the seeds and spread them. Again, this is a soft machine operated by humidity, and this can be studied with our formalism, A and B, and all these mathematics. But the benefit of doing it is that we can quantitatively relate shape, 3-dimensional shape, to what's going on in the material. And then we can also first build a mimic of this seed pod, which we saw already. But we can also see that we don't need this specific structure. There is a universal mathematical and mechanical structure. If we can generate it with different materials, the result will be more or less the same. So we can do it with stretched latex sheets, for example. We can stretch them to 2 different directions, glue them, and then we get basically a structure, I didn't explain why, that has this property and it will behave similarly. So then we can do experiments and see that different shapes emerge from the same sheet depending on different parameters, angles, width, etc., etc. And we as physicists did our work. We formulated and we solved this problem in a sense that we can connect and we can compute the 3-dimensional shape or different parameters and also generate it. Okay, with this, this is just all this physics apparently also occurs in the sub-micron scale. These are molecules that self-assemble and take this 3-dimensional shape. This is a completely different story. Now to our main subject, the science-design interaction. So naturally, this field of self-morphing is mechanical. It leads to 3-dimensional structures or envelope, and it's very natural. It has very natural interest for design and maybe architectural context. So we believe there is a clear potential, but does it work? How to do it? And apparently we already heard today very nice examples of what you do and how it works. Let me tell you about our experience here and our what we've learned. So this is, for example, this is from the course Maya mentioned, Betzalel course of 2nd degree. This is work of Yusuf Rajbi. He's a glass and clay artist. And here you see a crack pattern that initially was regarded as undesired, but later on Yusuf turned it into a motif in his designs. And since I knew about the physics of fracture, we could interact, and I could help him a little bit about this. I will not talk about. So, positive aspects in this collaboration. We implement fresh ideas from basic science. We don't wait for a technique or for a scientific knowledge to mature slowly and go through the engineering and eventually get to the hands of designers, but the designers are there when it happens, and they can identify what is interesting and affect the research and lead to different outcomes. These days, it seems that the communication between the 2 disciplines is easy. Both on the science side, there's more soft science, and on the designers, there's extensive use of computational tools that bridge the need of using mathematics as a language and as we can understand, language is the issue here. And so I think computers these days help us a lot to communicate. As Maya mentioned before, these are highly complementary viewpoints. If we deal with materials, so scientists would usually use equations to describe and study materials, while designers think of the human aspect. I think each part without the other one is missing, and the synergy of having all two viewpoints on the same subject is extremely efficient. And as we will see, it works both ways. The interaction is fruitful and not just as a way of taking science into products, but also feeding back to science. What are the problems? And there are problems, gaps. We in the sciences, we have what we call research students, young talented people that spend 3, 4, sometimes 5 years working on a project and take it from a very initial point, develop it all the way. We learned that this is missing in the design disciplines in Israel. Timescales related to the first difference. The timescales, projects that typically we see in design are short-term, very efficient, extremely efficient compared to what we do, but it creates difficulties in synchronizing. A big problem is a missing platform for research in design in Israel, at least. We have universities with physics department, chemistry, engineering. There, people like me get their salaries and they do what they want and they research, even if it takes longer or shorter. And we can be completely dedicated to curiosity or to what we would believe good science, not thinking of a product. We miss such an isolated environment for designers. And still there are gaps, even though I mentioned that the gaps are not that big, there are gaps, and we need to give some effort in order to improve the communication. So I will still have some time. I will quickly now describe channels of activity. So one way is designers visit lab of science lab like we saw before, and then in this case of Dana Zelig, for example, with Elise, she combined textile with gels, and so you get a hybrid textile that can change its shape in water. Or the work of Shira Shoval and Ariel Blonder from 2018 about frustrated material, these latex sheets that they studied it parametrically and showed how a frustrated sheet can generate complicated shapes once you put cuts in it. Another direction is patents and commercialization that we already saw. This is, for example, self-morphing pasta that we do together with Maya Ben David and Liora Rosin. So, dough is an active material. Okay, let's organize it in a way that its activity will go into Gauss metric and get shape. So, first test that we did in the lab, sorry, excuse me, showed us that it is possible. So these are these pastas, regular pastas, but arranged in a specific way that when you boil them, very quickly they get three-dimensional. And Maya and Liora developed these concepts and showed that you can get with a very rich a range of shapes that emerge while boiling. You can transfer them flat and then boil them and get shape, etc., and eventually eat them, which is again a good experience in the lab, having pasta dinners. Designers can also become more and more independent after they took something from the lab. I'm sorry. And again, another work of Ariel and Shira, perspective ceramic. Again, if they had asked me about that, I would tell them, don't do it. This is something ceramics breaks. So what they do, they take clays with different shrinkage coefficient, put them together, which is a highly forbidden practice in traditional pottery. But since they knew what they were looking for, they did it in order to achieve a controllable self-morphing ceramics. So this is a zoo of many different shapes. They were all flat before putting in the oven, and they shaped themselves into these three-dimensional beautiful structures, which was just now presented in an exhibition called Textilism. I think this is the one before the last. A long-term joint research project. This is, again, getting closer to my field. So Ariel Blonder, which we already saw works of hers, she's a PhD in architecture. She's doing a postdoc with me. And what we're trying to do is self-morphing architecture. Okay, can we make structures that in architectural scale and with construction materials that will self-morph, self-shape themselves using this principle? So again, I will not get details, but this is a recently published paper in a very good journal. This is just to say that, again, highlighting that it is beneficial for the lab, for the physics lab, this collaboration. Again, ceramics and composite materials, we study them as scientists, do the graphs, connect to the theory, and then propose a computation interface for the designer to start building structures with these materials and hopefully combine them in architecture. There are other projects run by Ofri Dar and Sani Lustov. Both are industrial designing students. They work in the lab. And again, as I mentioned, it is beneficial for both ways. So here are two good, very good scientific projects that emerged from a discussion with Ariel about self-morphing ceramics. I tried to explain her something, I saw I could not. And then we worked on it, and PRX, it's the best physics journal. Again, this is purely related to the self-morphing ceramics. JMPS, again, a journal, best solid mechanics journal. This is just to show that this interaction feeds back to a purely scientific problems. And I find this interaction highly fertilizing. And an interesting thing is that, again, having students and postdocs from both disciplines in the same space, it is very nice to see that fruitful interaction between everybody, and we get surprises. Some of them are even useful, some of them are just interesting, and I think with this, I'd like to thank you.
Okay, Professor Sharon, thank you very much. Very interesting, very fascinating work, very inspiring. Okay, so officially this event is supposed to be over in 4 minutes, so maybe we can do a quick Q&A session. If people can stay a bit longer, we're more than welcome. But maybe we can move on. So if anybody have questions, please type them in the Q&A part of the webinar. If you're more comfortable with writing them in Japanese, please go ahead, write them in Japanese or in Hebrew. We can translate. But maybe Romy, you can I pass it over to you?
Yes. So thank you, Yuri, and thank you everyone for the fascinating talks. I'd like to start with a very general question to all the scientists in the room. And since it's very broad and Eran presented beautifully, maybe you can tell us just one thing that from your experience, you benefited from working with designers, that is, non-experts from the field of design, be they architects or ceramicists or product designers that enter your labs and enter your field of research. And they come up with new ideas. What is the main benefit that you achieved?
Since the silence, I can just add what I already told. It can be new ideas, it can be questions, but I find that also misunderstandings is a very powerful engine for progress. You say something and your colleague understands it wrongly and suggest an explanation, and suddenly this explanation actually is another, makes sense. And I find this interaction between disciplines simply generating new things. Many of them are useless, but even just few of them are new and useful. These are fresh and new things that very quickly can be developed into simply exciting things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do agree. It's very interesting to interact with the designers. For our case, it's really good that well, it's not really good that our technology is a little bit difficult to apply for real life, but they easily think about the future possibility and then bring the sort of future to us, whereas scientists a little bit more on a little locked in the current situation. And then it's not just for me, but also in the past, our student interact with the designers, and the interaction really bring a lot of joy to the students and insights to them. So that was really nice as well.
Okay, for me, we had the more like a practical benefits. So at the end of this collaboration, we got a device with which I could make a pitch talk in front of companies. And also I could talk to students much more easily. I also do lots of outreach based on these devices. So somehow I felt like it gave me more opportunities to access to people who I couldn't have without the device, because all the experiments I used to do in the lab was too nerdy that I couldn't communicate well with people outside of the field. But the designers helped us to put it into a nice, like a concept that I can reach other type of audience. So for me, it was more like a real practical benefit. And it was a great experience to do this.
Super, thank you. Yuri, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I was just about, maybe I can balance out and address a question to Maya. So I don't know, I have my own experience when approaching working with researchers and scientists. For me, it's always, it's sometimes very confusing because there's so much exciting research out there, and it's always really hard to choose which way to go, which lab to approach. I wonder if you have the same experience, and what's the process for you to select which lab to approach, who to collaborate with? How do you pick your projects? And
how do I pick the labs?
Yes.
I think it has two angles. First, in every fertile collaboration, you have to have good communication. So I'm searching for scientists that we, on a basic level, we communicate well. We can share ideas and the conversation is open. I try to, well, there's always a kind of misperception about the professions from each, like for me, towards science and science about design. But at the end, if the conversation I feel is agile and open and kind of curious towards one another, I feel that normally there's potential. And there's questions of how the experiment practice is being done and the subject itself. We had very complex kind of collaboration with scientists, for example, coming from nanoscience, which is very hard. It's kind of completely abstract realm. It's hard for designers not to be able to touch things and to experiment with their hands and prototype ideas. So for us, the whole nanoscale was very difficult. So I try to look at how not just the subjects of the research, but how the experiments are being done, the craft of the experiment, the rhythm of the lab. And I try to see if designers could really fit in this kind of rhythm. And if I see that it's possible and that there are a certain tool we can easily, intuitively understand and put our hands on, I think it can be quite good for a collaboration. And there's also the notion of shared curiosities. Like I'm searching always for this feeling that we are both curious about what can happen. And I feel that the curiosity is the key, basically, to everything.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Maya. Let me just check if we have audience. We don't have any questions from the audience. Do you guys have questions to each other? Maybe anything you're curious? Because I think so. Maya and Professor Rani work together. Kyuchi Sensei and Sugihara Sensei know each other. We work together. But maybe you want to ask somebody from Israel something, from Japan.
I have a question to Professor Sharon. I was fascinated about this pasta. Can we buy them?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's in some kind of a process which I'm not an expert in commercialization, but I believe you will be able to buy such pasta. So we have our pastas. I'm sorry. There is another line of self-morphing pasta using different technique from Carnegie Mellon, from Li-Ning Yao's lab, and she came from the media lab, which I showed. I believe it's a matter of time that self-morphing structure will become part of our life. It could be in food, commodities, maybe in large-scale things as well. I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully, within a year or so, there will be some things on the market.
Okay.
But you're welcome. But you're welcome to the lab. And if Maya and Leora are here, they are the ones who know how to do it.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was good. Yeah, after COVID, maybe I can visit your lab, get some pasta.
We hope so. Before we wrap up, I'd like to ask something that is unavoidable. Despite the beautiful and creative endeavors that we've seen here, I'd like to ask a question about the way that we actually teach and the way that multidisciplinarity and curiosity need to be backed with proper professionalization. That is, what is needed for a designer to approach the professional labs? What do they need to know? Because it's not enough to be armed with talent and curiosity. So do you think that there is one essential thing that designers should learn before approaching your specific labs? Like maybe we can somehow create a baseline for designers that would like to enter labs, be they from physics, neuroscience, or engineering, by starting to ask you guys that have collaborated with designers, what do you think is the most important thing that is missing in the training of designers before they start collaborating with you, specifically you, because it's a big question. Eran, maybe you can start, given the fact that you have so many designers.
Yes, so I must say that I'm surprised by the fact that we, the physics department, we give service courses to biologists, to medical students, to earth sciences, chemistry. We teach them physics, basic physics, electricity, mechanics, whatever they need. They tell us what they need, and we teach them physics because they know that physics is part of it. Same, they study mathematics with the math department. And it is, I find it very strange that people that actually build things, work with matter, think about three-dimensionality, functions, deal with heat, with electricity, with fluids. They don't take courses, scientific courses that give them basis to build on top of it with their intuition, with their talent. So in my lab, the specific students I mentioned are simply very, very talented. They studied physics, I think, and math in high level in high school. And they keep on studying themselves. But I had some examples that the gap was too big and it was simply impossible to work together. So I find it strange that Betzalel, for example, doesn't have a study that is based or concentrated with science. Then together with the university, you can cook up the proper balance, but surely it would be helpful.
I agree. Thank you. Sugihara Sensei, what is your opinion?
Yeah, so when a designer approached us, I think very often researchers don't know what you want or where this collaboration should lead us. What's our benefit? Why should I spend time with designers? So maybe you could start with a benefit, in future, I could make a device out of your research. That could be a pitch talk. And if you could show what could come out from this collaboration potentially, and then what the scientists could do with it if it's successful, I think that could motivate the researcher, because many of us just simply have never done this before. So simply we don't know what kind of benefits we could potentially get. There are lots of benefits, like everybody said right now, we just don't know. So maybe you should teach us, from the very beginning, that this is you should not miss this chance because we're so good. So maybe, I think.
So this is the training for the scientists, and I think Maya wants to say something about her own experience.
I'm laughing because we hear this question a lot, but also this kind of expectations that we will know what will happen at the end, but we also don't know what will happen at the end. So this kind of not knowing is part of the journey, and we don't always understand. It's not an easy brief. Like when I meet a new lab and I go into or even after one kind of deep lecture of one of the main scientists, it's very hard. It takes sometimes a month to transform what I identified, what I saw as an opportunity, and to transform it into a design brief. And then I can maybe say, okay, the project can be this or that or that. It can evolve into a product, or it can evolve into a speculation or any other kind of project. So I understand why scientists many times desire to know what will happen in the process, how it will evolve, what kind of actual dialogue will happen, and what will be the outcome, because time is limited. There's a lot of stress in the lab to be focused on the main research, and we are always kind of disrupting the rhythm or disrupting the work. But you need to have like a leap of faith that it will be fertile and inspiring for both. And sometimes it doesn't work, but I think both sides take the risk.
Thank you. Very true. Like failure is part of the process, I think, in both design and science. So, of course, in the mutual way. Ikuuchi Sensei, before we depart, would you like to answer training for designers then enter your lab, or vice versa for scientists that want to work with designers?
For now, just the maybe neuroscience or the other field too. But it's really rapidly changing. The science is changing, and then it requires a lot more computer science and coding and those things. And then we really want to learn more. And then I guess like Yuri knows a lot about those. And then those people comes in, and it's really instant sort of chemistry. Like both can open our eyes and just learn each other, and that really is a good thing. For my lab at least. And maybe I imagine that is true for most a lot others too. So a practical thing, practically those maybe good currently in 2022. Maybe it'll change, but
well, everything is changing.
Yeah.
All the time. Great.
Okay, I think we're a little bit behind time. So thank you everybody for joining. I apologize for the extra time it caused, but I think this was a very interesting and fruitful discussion. It was very interesting to hear everyone's projects. I hope all the participants enjoyed staying with us. If you missed some of the webinar, you can watch it later on our YouTube channel. Look up DLX Design Lab on YouTube. And thank you again for joining, and have a good evening, everyone in Japan, and a great day in Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks so much.